This one your initial? You're finished. You're all done.
South Sudan has gone through years of protracted conflict, and many generations have been affected, including the generation of the leaders who were negotiating in the high-level revitalization forum. But with each new generation, the effects of conflict are worse. They are worse because the world is moving ahead, and with globalization, to catch up with the rest, it means one has to avoid conflict as much as possible. So the more a country is engulfed in conflict, the lesser its young people stand a chance to thrive as the years go by and as the world moves ahead. So for very many young people, and I can speak for those in my generation and those who are younger, we have been affected in the sense that many of us, I would say half of us, are living outside our country. We are yet to truly experience what it means to belong to South Sudan and enjoy the fruits of our independence. A good number of us are in refugee camps, and there are also those who are internally displaced. We have had an education outside the country, and there are also those who have had an opportunity to get educated inside the country, albeit that education is not as good as that gotten outside the country, but is being made better and would have been better if there was no conflict. So how it has also affected us is that while many other young people have had tranquility in their countries and they've been able to prepare themselves for the job market and get employment opportunities, but also create jobs, that is limited for us. Those opportunities are limited for us. Yes, we are born with inherent dignity, but the country we live in is supposed to afford us opportunities to live a life of dignity. And with conflict, we do not have that. With conflict, we end up in refugee camps, we end up in internally displaced persons camps, we end up committing crimes, we end up participating in shedding blood to ruin lives and not shedding blood to save lives, speaking as a medical doctor in terms of blood donation. So, and also the other thing is that conflict has left most of us disenfranchised from decision making, because we get different versions from different leaders who are leading different groups, and we are only following instead of getting ourselves into making the decisions that would make the country better. But that's the absurd part of it, and looking at us as victims. But at the same time, this conflict has awakened many young people to take leadership at a time when it's needed. There are many young people who are undertaking initiatives to build peace in the country, but also amongst their age mates in the refugee camps, even in the diaspora. They are trying to do as many meaningful things as possible to help their fellow citizens remain steadfast in the hope that our country will be better someday and that there will be immense opportunities for everyone. And I think that's something that should not be taken for granted. That perhaps, yes, conflict has been bad, and even as there are good things that are coming out of it in terms of many young people emerging and trying to do good things for the country, that still does not justify why there should be conflict. It's just to say that it's good to look at the other bit, that there are young people who have arisen out of this situation and said, no, we can't let our country get to ruins. We can't just sit on the sidelines and watch without doing nothing. And there are many. They are taking leadership. They're in the diaspora. They're inside the country, even in difficult circumstances. As a person, of course, war has affected me in the sense that I did not finish my education as early as I would have finished it. And there are many, many young people who have had to go through that. There are many who have not even had an opportunity to get into a classroom. At least I was lucky that I got into a classroom. And there are many who are not certain that they will one day learn a skill, maybe of how to lay bricks or do something for themselves and live a meaningful life. All they have known is to live conflict. So it has also affected me as a person. It has also meant that I cannot live with my family when I want to. It has meant that instead of living a normal life like any young person in the world, where you go to school, you finish, you get married, you get a job, I am so engulfed in doing all that I can day and night to see that my country gets peace. And that often means making sacrifices, including sacrificing my own social life. So that's how it affects many young people, especially for us, the young women. It has also left many young people traumatized. So when we are talking of levels of trauma, I believe South Sudan has not been properly assessed, but speaking as a medical person, being a medical doctor, a good percentage of us are traumatized. We have different psychiatric conditions. Some are in their irreversible stages, and there are all kinds of people, including our very own leaders. So that in itself is worrying. And I can't say that even myself, I'm so certain that I'm not traumatized because of the many years of protracted conflict. What should happen? Certainly, it's important to end the conflict, to end the war unreservedly, because it's costing us so much. It's costing us, most importantly, it's costing us our dignity. Having citizens who are scattered all over the world, as we are, as South Sudanese, yet we have a country so rich, a country so endowed with resources, is something that is very shameful. And if there is anything that I think shouldn't be too much to ask from anybody, is to end the conflict. But not just ending the conflict. It's for leaders to realize that South Sudan will always be there. But it's important that each of us determines whether there is a gap between our rhetoric and our practice in relation to the promises we had when we voted for our independence. We are here today trying to negotiate peace because there is an abyss. The abyss between the rhetoric and the practice of our leaders is so wide, is so deep. They have not walked the talk. They have not walked to deliver on the promises of our independence, on the promise of why we had to languish in foreign countries and see that we fight to liberate ourselves from what we at the time perceived as marginalization, only to come and see it again in a different form. So it's a time, I think, all leaders sit back and reflect and see whether they have lived up to these promises, or they have simply